And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 171. Today we've got a feedback session, so we've had 3 people send in images, so we're going to look at those and give some direct feedback on them, as well as the potential of I am still dealing with the sciatica, so hopefully though I will be able to get through that. I think I've found a system for doing so, but what we might also be contending with is we have a terrible connection here. The internet connection is dodgy at its best and has been known to cut out. So if it does, please try and stick around and hopefully it will reconnect again. Needless to say, there's an engineer coming out tomorrow. The one on Friday never turned up. So let's hope this works. So yes, hello and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Oh, what am I doing here? So, sorry about that. Right, start again. Yes, understanding photography with Kim Ayres, if not exactly understanding the technology of trying to do the live podcast. So yes, if you happen to be watching live, say hello, leave me a message, tell me what the weather's doing. If you're not watching live but you're watching the recorded version, do make sure, remember that there are in fact 170 previous versions of this for you to dip into. Lots of fantastic information, brilliant photos that have been sent in, lots of critique, lots of ideas and challenges too to enjoy. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, do please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and click the notifications bell and like. If you're going to like this video, that always helps the algorithms a little bit. I can see we've got a few people in already. Robert says howdy all from Texas. April says hello from partly sunny Long Island, New York. Maggie says hello here from a sunny CD. Yes, CD, Castle Douglas. This is where we are, and it's a rather beautiful day. Not that warm, but it is not that cold either. About 11 or 12 degrees, I think, Celsius, which feels quite good for around here at this time of year. Nadia says hi from a sunny Fife. Sandra says hello, everyone, from a partly sunny Birmingham. Janet says hello from an overcast Mississauga. So that's where we're at. Okay, so welcome. Glad you could join us all. Right. Okay, so where are we? So yeah, let's make a start then. So what I'm going to do then is, like I said, we've had 3 people sent in images. So Alex, Jonas and Andy have all sent in different kinds of images with different ideas of what we might do with them. So I think there's plenty to play around with. But just a wee reminder then that with these feedback sessions, this is your opportunity to get feedback directly on your photos. There's not many places on the internet where you can get that, and in fact there's plenty of places which offer feedback on your photos and portfolio for quite a large fee. So if you want genuine feedback from a genuine professional photographer on your images, then in most places you will have to pay a chunk of money for it. This is one of the only places on the internet where you can actually get it for free. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you join the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook page, if you happen to be on Facebook, where you can place the images. But if you don't do Facebook, then email them directly to me. Let me know what your sticking point is, tell me what the struggle is with your particular photos, and I will do my best to help. So, okay, let's make a start then. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with Alex. Now, Alex sent in a message saying, following from last week, Kim, I couldn't watch live, but have since viewed it on YouTube. So what we were talking there about was the idea of slow shutter speed photography. For those who were watching last week, you might remember. And so he sent me 3 shots. He said 2 of these were taken handheld. And so actually the idea of doing a handheld slow shutter speed just makes the mind boggle. Anyway, so let me just show you the photos he's done here. So this was one picture. You can see it's a sort of fairly bright day, but we do have that slow shutter speed, and he's put the metadata down in the corner. This was taken back in 2014. Aperture f29. So as you can see, to let as minimal amount of light in, he's gone as narrow as he can with his aperture. ISO 100. So again, ISO as small as possible, again, so that little amount of light is getting in, so that he can then go for an exposure time of 1/4 of a second. Now, 1/4 of a second handheld is pretty amazing, and I think I said as much when he posted it. He said, he replied himself, to be honest, I'm quite amazed at the handheld results. I just took a deep breath and gently pressed the button and hoped for the best. However, what he is looking for is a bit of feedback on composition. He sent in 3 different images. This one he said was done on a tripod. And this one was also another handheld at 1/4 of a second. I mean, 1/4 of a second is extraordinarily difficult to do a real handheld at, and I think he was very lucky or very steady. I don't know whether he was maybe leaning against something as well. Sometimes another little trick, if you're ever sort of stuck there slightly and can give you an extra stop or two, is use the strap. If you can get the strap, and maybe if you're using this viewfinder in the back rather than the screen rather than actually looking through there, and then pull it tight against your neck, and then if you're pulling it tight against your neck, that actually helps steady it a little bit more. So essentially you're making your whole body a little bit more of a tripod. So rather than just your hands holding and potentially wobbling it, you make it more steady by pulling this against your neck. So you can often get an extra stop or two down on your shutter speed with that. That's a quick little trick there. So we've got these 3. That one was done at 1/10 of a second, that was done at 1/4 of a second, and that one was done at 1/4 of a second. Basically, apart from being impressed at being able to do handheld shutter speed, Alex is looking for a little bit of advice on the notion of composition. Each of the 3 has got a slightly different idea to it, but in some ways there's a similarity with all of them. I think of the 3 of them, this one works quite well, but really is about where's the story. You know, it's a game with the story, and very often, as I so often sort of say, most images tend to work better if you're closer in or if you're further out than what we tend to go for. And I think this is kind of the case with all 3 of these. With this one, for example, we've got a lovely bit of water flowing through here. There's all the scenery here, but how much of this scenery is really contributing to the story? It's lovely having that soft flow of the water, but there isn't anything else that's grabbing. It's not like there's a deer standing here or an interesting object standing there. It's not like there are things hanging off the trees. So do we need as much of that? And actually we find if we zoom in, apart from the fact that this is a small low resolution image, so we're going to get pixelated, but generally speaking, in terms of composition, zooming in something like this is starting to possibly make it a better picture. Now this is slightly complicated by the fact that you'll see my head stuck in the corner. Tell you what, then let's just open this with Photoshop so we can just get a better sense so that my head isn't getting in the way. But basically, just if I zoom in like this, I kind of feel that there's something better going on. Maybe it's quite nice down there. Okay, let's just crop this. So if we pull this in like that, maybe pull that in a bit there, and that, kind of something like this. I can't help but automatically feel that that's making a slightly better photo. We're not needing all those trees at the top. I think there's potential here for even zooming in even further if you've got the opportunity. Now, it might be a case of your lens isn't allowing you, but if you had a zoom lens that could allow you, then there are some interesting spots. I think this bit up here is particularly interesting. And if we just take something like that, as well as the diagonal of the water coming down here, we've kind of got a diagonal of the rocks going up there, which kind of adds to the dynamism. And there's some lovely movement in this bit here. And I think you've got a story there. And that is a kind of a slightly better story than the whole big picture. Likewise, there's interesting bits going on here, or even this little bit here as it goes over the edge. And we've got this little bit of covered rock over here. There's lovely little kind of diagonal going in there, just cutting off. And I think ultimately with this photo, I tend to feel it works better cut in. Similarly then, if we go to this one is another one where there's a lot of landscape around it, and I can't help but feel, you see, as we go in here, automatically straight away I kind of feel like we've got more going on here. What's really interesting with this is the multiple steps. We've, from this to this to this to this, lovely bit of shape here, and in this kind of corner where the water's coming down on this side but then flowing along here and coming down here. So you've got almost 90 degrees, two sides to the waterfall as such, curving in. And I think that's really, so there's a lot to be said for something like this, or if you're wanting to get that kind of multiple sense of here, but you don't really need all the rest of it. This, you don't need as much of this rock. You certainly don't need as much of that tree or this rock there. I think really everything is happening in here. And I think if you zoom in, and obviously you've got a higher resolution original, Alex, so you would have more to play with. But I think you could play around with the crop on that. And then the other one, this is slightly harder to do a kind of zoom in. If you zoom in like that, I mean, nice abstract, but it's not necessarily giving you anything much. I do think you tend to need the length that you have. Though you could possibly chop off a couple of the corners and in essence, kind of accentuate the height of the fall as well. So if we were to just pull that into there and pull that into there, I think in a way that kind of makes a slide. Maybe you don't need quite as much at the top there again. You just trim off a little bit, something like that. And I think that's kind of creating. So with each of these, what it all comes down to is when you're taking a photo, and this is true with any photo you're taking, but in this case, using each of these little waterfalls as an example, there's the subject and then there's the surrounds, the background. So there's the waterfall and then there's the rocks, or there's the waterfall and the trees and the rocks, or what have you. And the question is how much is the background supporting the subject or detracting from the subject? And this is the kind of question you need to have in your head at the point certainly at the point you're editing it, where you're cropping it. But ideally you kind of move towards, it's this thing again, where's the story? What's the really powerful bit of this? And the really powerful bit of each of these waterfall photos is the water and the fact that you're doing slow shutter speed. So it's creating that kind of smooth watery effect. But it's all about the movement of the water. You need enough background to give it context, but you don't want so much that it dilutes. Because the more background there is, the more it kind of dilutes the subject, unless the background is such that it is enhancing the subject, which is actually probably what I'm going to talk about in the next with the next submission. But hopefully, though, that gives you a couple of thoughts and ideas there, Alex, on your photos. So, like I say, still incredibly impressed. The idea you could actually do a handheld photo at 1/4 of a second. I wouldn't stand a chance with that. I tend to have about, if I've got to be handheld, I really don't like to go below 100th of a second, and I feel happier at 160th of a second just because of personal handshake. On the other hand, the wider angle you're at, the more leeway you have. If you've got a big zoom lens, any slight movement gets really exaggerated at the other end of the lens. The wider angle you are, the less that becomes. I could maybe go down to 60th of a second if I had a really full wide angle on a kind of, 10mm or 14mm wide, but there's a kind of limitation. Everything else I'd want a tripod, or seriously, pulling the thing against my neck, leaning against a rock, or, as I've talked before, using a bean bag and sitting the camera on top of that. But thank you for sending those ones in, Alex, and I hope that's given you a couple of ideas there. Right, a few more comments here. Anne's joined us, also says, good morning from Texas. April says, the waterfall's nicely done. Oh, Pat's joined us, says, sorry, a bit late. Sunny here in Somerset, that's lovely. Meg says, Meg's joined us now as well. April says she likes it when it's closer in as well. Sandra says, the cropping in really draws your attention to the waterfalls. Robert also agrees that the crop makes the story pop. April says composition makes a big difference. Meg says she really loves diagonals of the waterfalls. Nick Bath has joined us and says hello all. And now Pat's chatting away to April. Okay, so thank you for sending that one in, Alex. And so let's move on then. And the next one I'm going to talk about is Jonas. So where are we? Jonas sent us this one, and Jonas said, taken during sunrise at a small trip with my daughter. I forgot to bring fresh batteries for my camera. I use a Fuji X-T2, which is wonderful to photograph. So I was stuck with my phone, which I really don't enjoy taking pictures with. But it was such a beautiful morning. We were playing in a lovely little spot, so I tried anyway. I like the composition with the reeds guiding you out into the lake and the sunrise just noticeable on the left. I took a series of pictures as she was walking in the water. This one I'm pretty happy with, several leading lines guiding you to her chest/face and opening into the lake. I've been trying to be more conscious of my process when taking photos, but here I didn't have any plan or intentions except this is lovely, let me take some photos. In any case, feedback on composition would be welcome. So the first thing I have to say always, which is if you're happy with the photo, you're happy with the photo. You don't necessarily need feedback from me. It's always slightly tricky for me if people send me photos, say, hey, I'm really happy with this photo, what do you think? Because there's any number of things you can do with a photo to make changes which might suit me but wouldn't necessarily suit you. If you've got a difficulty with a photo, it's easier for me to give you ideas if I know where you feel your difficulty lies. Otherwise, it just becomes a kind of a quick matter of opinion. Do I like it? Yes, I do. Do I like it? No, I don't. What difference does it make? You like it. It's a picture of your daughter. So it's a tricky one. What I would say, yes, I mean, I think for all the reasons you've said, you've got the reeds moving into the distance, out to the lake. You've got her above the horizon. What's rather good here is that you've come down to her level so that you're not looking down at your daughter. And I think her head breaking above the horizon works quite well with that. And a nice bit of sun. There's a nice bit of colour. And one of the great things about the fact that you're using your phone is if I'm assuming that this is probably quite a modern phone, because despite the fact that the sun is there, she's not lost completely in silhouette. There is still colour in here. And a lot of modern phones, the algorithms they use in the for picture interpretation can be quite incredible for bringing out a lot of detail in the shadows that would normally just be completely lost. However, you have asked for a little bit of, you've asked for options here. So what I will do though is just show you something that kind of crossed my mind, other ways of looking at this. Now what you've done here, you've gone for a very center aligned photo. So your daughter is smack bang in the center and the horizon is pretty close to the center. So there's nearly as much sky as there is, certainly as there is water. So other options here though, I think to go back to this idea of generally speaking, photos are better off either closer in or further out. There are options here where you could move in, she's splashing around. There's options to take photos of, boots in water. That's a kind of fun style of shot. But I think with something like this, actually, there's something quite special about the landscape that she's in. Yes, she's splashing in the water, and I think, fine, you either go in and make a feature of that, or maybe you pull out and you make more of the fact. Now, what I will do here is I'll use the Photoshop generative fill just to kind of give us a sense of what you might have done. I'm not suggesting that you would use this instead of taking the photo, but when you're there, I think your different options, standing back a bit, getting more of a kind of grand landscape, and even maybe using a bit of kind of rule of thirds might make a difference here. So for example, if we take her here, and what I'm going to do is just create a little bit more space underneath, because I'm going to then expand this out a bit. And then you see if we do this kind of, so in a rule of thirds, she sort of would be a third of the way along, the body would be sort of something like this. So the head is kind of around that third corner. The body is running down through this bit. And then what I'm going to do is just hit generate, and hoping that we don't lose any kind of connection and that this doesn't take too long to go around. What Photoshop AI generating is going to do is it's going to create backgrounds based on what it sees, and it will give me usually 3 options, not always but mostly, and then we can just sort of, but the idea here is, like I say, not that I'm expecting you to generate a new background, but that at the time you're taking the photo is to try and be conscious of the idea of other options. That what would it be like if I try and get, the zoomed in versions, but also pulled back? What if I kind of try and make my subject so she's part of a larger landscape? This really seems to be taking its time to get to the end here. Here we go. There we go. You see, I'm always really quite impressed with the way this does. A couple of different versions here. don't think it really matters. I'll go with that one. And if we take a look at this then as a composition, and then I think we can see much more this idea of, so your daughter is on that kind of point of thirds, the son is just almost on another kind of point of thirds. The extension of the reeds kind of really draws out, and I think there's something in the composition here with this. Maybe even just, you could maybe even just lose a little bit more of the sky so that your daughter's head is on there, and yeah, actually that feels better to me. And so the horizon is moving more into that kind of thirds level as well. And as a composition goes, I kind of feel that there's a lot in that. Now, obviously, I don't know what the reeds were like. Maybe they were more like that. Maybe they were completely different. But it's just that notion that I think in this case, you know, whereas with Alex, I was talking about the idea of zooming in, I felt made it a better picture. In this case, I feel kind of pulling out of it and creating more of, you know, she's splashing about, but this sun is splashing about in an amazing bit of landscape. That little muddy edge of the loch, or edge of the lake, little mud, the reeds, the sunrise, the clouds, and it might maybe some little overhanging twigs and stuff like that. I think that you can make more of a feature of that. So that's really all I wanted to suggest with that one, Jonas. Is that idea then that so I'm just noticing things twirling around like it's taking a little while to catch up. Hopefully you're still with me. But yes, so really there, Jonas, is that idea of, I think sometimes, you know, they give it room to breathe, they have more space around it. And I think in the case of Where's the Story with Your Daughter, in that photo, that it is about your daughter in that environment, and it was a lovely environment. And I think, you know, certainly yes, you've gone for the centre aligned and the light and the reeds kind of moving towards her. I think that moving off to one side is another option, but it's up to you. I mean, you said you were happy with the photo, and if you're happy with the photo and you prefer your version, absolutely, that's fine. There is no absolute right or wrong with this. There is interpretation. All I'm doing here is showing you another possibility. So, but I hope you found that useful. But thank you for sending in that image. A couple more comments here. What have we got here? Okay, the diagonals. Sandra says, lovely lighting. April says, that's a nice shot. Peter's joined us from Annan, saying, hello, all from a sunny Annan. Pat says, colouring is beautiful. April says she loves the landscape fill with the tree. Sandra says, I'm amazed by Photoshop's AI filling and it makes the photo more pleasing to look at. And April agrees with Sandra on that. Yeah, I'm finding the autofill has its advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is it's a lower resolution at the moment until Photoshop. So it's fine for kind of web photos, you can get away with extra bits, but if you were wanting to do a printed photo, you would find that if you zoomed in on the image, that actually all the fill part would be a bit blurrier and fuzzier. There are ways around that, but it requires going in and essentially rebuilding it. But in this case, for me, just to be able to demonstrate what it would be like if you made the picture, change the picture larger, it's a very useful little device. Right, so just a little quick reminder here that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting or entertaining and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do that. And of course another way is invite your friends and let's grow this wonderful little community of ours. Right, okay, so on to the one more. So now we're going to move on to Andy. Now this was an interesting one because now let me just bear with me one moment, because I've suddenly realised there was something in Andy's bit here which I didn't, I forgot to copy. Now, yeah, so let me just copy that and paste this in here. A little bit of extra text as such. And so what happened is Andy has been over to Japan. Woohoo, Andy. Yeah, certainly a little bit of envy there, I think. And he's been playing around with a bit of street photography. Now, Andy's, seen some of his street photography before, seen a lot of his pose photography, and I'm always rather impressed with it. So, but what I want to, losing where I want to be here again. Close that. Okay, back where I need to be. Now, so what Andy said is, I'm looking for help with a concept for this week's. I have a series of 3 images all around the same theme, but can't decide which is the strongest of the series for use in competition. The title will be Tokyo Vice. The candidate images all have good and bad traits. So let me show you the candidate images. So photo number 1, got schoolgirl here, mask on, no sexual vices, which is contrasting with this rabbit with the suggestive t-shirt standing in the window, this sort of strong pink vibe going on. So despite the fact that, you know, maybe it's a sort of a shop with some adult themes in it, is trying to say that, but it's not some kind of knocking shop as such. So this was picture number 1. Andy's obviously found it interesting, and what he's trying to do then is juxtapose the sign with the rabbit, but also people walking past, because picture number 2 is this one, and here, whereas this one, the girl is blocking the SER of services, so it looks like no sexual vices, so that changes it. This one, this guy is blocking the no, so it says sexual services, which changes the mood and feel of it completely. And then this one, likewise, he's blocking the no and it's sexual services. We can figure that it will probably have the S there. The difference with, whereas this one, the guy seems to be walking past, this one, the guy seems to be glancing over at what's going on. So 3 different photos of essentially the same place, 3 different interpretations. And so Andy, to go back to Andy, he's what he's saying then is, he says, so he's feeling that image 1 contains a schoolgirl, which contains a nice juxtaposition with the wording of the sign and the window content. Image 2 has a more dominant character in the foreground and works best visually for me, but he has no engagement with the signage or window. And image 3 for me is the weakest, but the foreground character better fills the frame and some engagement with the sign. So which of these should he go for? Now, for me, my feeling straight away, as soon as I saw the 3, was I felt by a long shot this was the strongest of all the images. The fact that her head is blocking, so it looks like no sexual vices. He's even called, wanting to put an image for the title, calling it Tokyo Vice, and that vice then becomes part of that. For Tokyo, we've clearly got Japanese young woman in the foreground, the whole rabbit and t-shirt thing creating that sense of vice, and the kind of grungy nature of the, you know, these kind of rusty patches, the concrete wall, that kind of grunge vice. Again, this to me says everything that, out of the 3 photos, this for me is the strongest one for the competition that Andy's wanting to go for. A couple of things I would then want to do is, we can see that this horizon kind of comes down here. I will want to straighten that a bit, possibly give it a little bit more vignette, maybe grunge it up a little bit. So if I open that with Photoshop, for just as a quick kind of duplicate that layer, go to free transform, all I need to do is grab that corner, stretch it up a little bit to make sure that that line is more or less straight there, and that one is more or less horizontal there. Very subtle, and it immediately creates a slightly better kind of, you're not wanting that tilt, you're trying to make it look as though you're straight on. And then what I would also want to do maybe is just grunge that up a bit, so maybe give it a bit of a vignette to bring it, so if I go to optics here, so kind of just curling in the corners a little bit, and maybe at this point I go to the effects, add a little bit of clarity and kind of grunge it a bit. And so ultimately then we go from that to that, and I think it's the little touches like that, maybe bring a little bit more out the shadows, would be one way of going about it. However, that was my immediate thought. before I could do anything much more about it, I noticed John Painter had leapt into the comments. And John said, just caught your post in my feed and I'll give you my thoughts. The first image is far and away the strongest. And I wouldn't bother with the other two. The fact that you've got the sign to read no sexual vices is perfect and makes the whole shot. All I would suggest is to straighten the horizon of the image, slightly burn or otherwise reduce the top edges, which is what I did with the vignette. And then put an almost imperceptible vignette around the perimeter to dirty up the mood and draw the eye to the middle diagonal between the eyes of the girl and the eyes of the rabbit. So pretty much then, John leapt in and said the same thing. Then I noticed a couple of days later, Andy had gone in and re-edited the image and created this version of it, where he's then taken what John said, but he's also added this rather interesting blue tinge to it. And so now what you've got is you've got this blue and purple vibe going on, which has a really quite kind of cyberpunk feel to it. So depending on what kind of imagery you're looking at and the different kind of photos, cyberpunk is this idea of kind of futurist. If you know steampunk is like the idea of futurism from the Victorian Edwardian age. Cyberpunk is a kind of dystopian future idea. It sort of kind of started bubbling out of Japan and anime and manga and animations and what have you back in the kind of late 80s, early 90s. And sometimes there's this particular kind of blue-pink kind of colour scheme finds its way into it. And there are even places like if you watch Blade Runner 2049, there's bits in the city where you will find this same kind of blue-pink colour scheme. So that kind of changes it as well. So I find that interesting. I quite like that idea of going for that colour scheme. So where does this leave me? Andy put it in for feedback. John's already given good feedback. Andy's taken that feedback and then taken it to another level. So I was trying to think, is there anything else I can add to this? And one of the things that struck me was the idea of Japanese street photography. And there's a street photographer who I follow, Japanese street photographer I follow called Tatsuo Suzuki. So Tatsuo Suzuki. And if you're into street photography, if you're into Japanese street photography, I would say go and look him up, Tatsuo Suzuki. And he's got a very kind of punk edge to him, but he does it, most of his street photography is in black and white. But he does a hard black and white contrast. And I thought, well, I wonder if that style, how that style would work with this. So flicking back to here, if we just, we'll take the version where we've just straightened it out. And what you do with something like this is, if we go to filter, so we'll give it that little bit of vignette just to kind of bring in the edges. But then what we do, if we go to colour and we desaturate, go back to light, and then play with the contrast, and we go for a much harder, now maybe the shadow's gone a bit dark here, I'm just going to bring those shadows up a little bit more, but also really boost that contrast, maybe take those highlights down a fraction, something like that. And you end up, again, the hard contrast of the black and white, you could even, let's do a curves a second, let's just take that up a little bit, take that down. You can really start playing with it if you want. Do something like that, where you're creating a really hard contrast. Now what's happening is maybe this is too bright here, so what I might do is just take that down a bit and just bring back in a little bit more of that's it, dark. That's what I'm going to do. Let's go up to 100%. Darken down that little bit of wall a bit. Bring up her bag a little bit, so there's a little bit more thing here, just maybe a touch more in here. But essentially what I'm talking about here is that you get to play around, maybe just do that so there's a little bit more separation so she isn't completely lost in the corner there. But that really creates this harder edge. And part of the notion of this image is that it's designed to make you feel uneasy. Okay, this isn't a pleasant image. This isn't a fun, soft bluebell landscape. This is one to put you on edge. This is one to make you go, ooh, you know. And if you're going to go black and white, I think you kind of go grungy there. And similarly, I think you can get away that similar kind of thing happens then with the other photos. That if we take this one into Photoshop and do the same kind of thing. So if actually I would do more with this one, I think. I'll tell you what, let's just go into here and just go straightforwardly. I'll do a gradient. Gradient map stuck in blue. Let me go to black. I'll do a gradient map like that, maybe on classic. But then again, take the curves and pull down a kind of hard edge, you know, something like that. You're creating these kind of stronger contrasts. I think you kind of end up with something kind of interesting. Or maybe actually, I'll tell you what, I will just take this into Camera Raw, because I think I want to be able to play slightly more with this. So again, a little bit of vignette, no, not effects, color, lose the saturation, light, take up the contrast, not the hard contrast, but we want to bring down those highlights a bit, bring those shadows up a touch, go to the curves, accentuate that a little bit more, something like that, get that S bend down, something like that. And again, you end up with this kind of interesting grungy, might even effects, where are we, go to a little bit of clarity, something like that. And again, you've got that hard, rough, edgy kind of feel to it. And I think for this one gets transformed and it really ramps it up considerably. Likewise then, if we go to your other one, with this guy here, who's moving through the thing. At the moment, his white shirt is really kind of a bit dominant. Again, if I do something like that, I think it makes it interesting. Again, though, I might want to play around a little bit, maybe make his shirt a bit darker, his face a bit lighter. But we can see again that we've got this kind of, I quite like that one and this. But, you know, coming back to that, I think this one becomes much stronger like this, but I still think this one works too. So ultimately then, Andy, I think given the fact that John already gave you some good advice on, and that you've taken and done a cyberpunk version of it, which I think works quite well, I think another way to go is to look at that notion of that really hard, contrasty, black and white, quite punky, really, edgy, grungy, strong contrast. And like I said, if you do go and look up Tatsuo Suzuki, amazing photographer, street photographer, absolutely prolific. If you follow his Instagram feed every single day, there's several photos go in, but always worth looking at. But hopefully that gives you a few ideas to play with. Right, a couple more comments here. April says, oh, that's in Japan. Honestly, creepy. I thought the first one was best, though. Peter also agrees the first one was best. Sandra thought the first shot was the best by some margin. Nadia also thought the first one was the best one. And April says, I really appreciate the old classic Japanese photography. April says, this photo could also be in the horror genre, not just street photography, like the horror movie poster, Halloweenish. Yeah, I know. There's a little bit of kind of Donnie Darko in that one as well, I think. For anybody who's seen that movie. All right, so thank you very much to Andy, to Alex and to Jonas for sending in the images, and I hope the rest of you have all found this quite interesting. So next week I'm going to be doing another feedback session. So again, this is your opportunity to get direct feedback on your own images. So do please send me something. If you don't send me anything, it's going to be a very short very short episode, but episode number 172 next week will be, and in the meantime, if anybody wants to wish me a happy birthday on Wednesday, it's my birthday on Wednesday. I know my wife always goes, why on earth do you ever tell anybody that? But I like it. I like getting the birthday wishes from complete strangers and people I half know and people who I know slightly and people who I don't know. Anyway, that's on Wednesday. I will be the ripe old age of 57. So that can make some of you feel very young, or some of you feel very old, depending on which way you do it. In the meantime, though, like I say, next Sunday, episode 172, will be a feedback session. So between now and then, make sure you either put your images into the Facebook group, also called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, or email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk, with your image. If you've edited it already, if you could send me the unedited original as well, that's always useful, because it may give me more options to be able to help you find some interesting ways to develop the photo. Right, okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Where do we go here? I do that one, that one, that one, that one. That's it. Thank you ever so much. Oh, I've got a couple of people saying happy birthday for Wednesday. Thank you very much. And Robert saying, hope I feel better by then. Yes, well, I do. Today's been a slightly sore day, but okay. I am definitely on the mend. It's just painfully slow, both literally and figuratively, as they say. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.